Note 7.4, we're going to be looking at direct and inverse variation. So whenever you have direct variation, it's y equals k times x. So you will be multiplying anytime it says directly. So if it's varying directly, you're going to be multiplying. Inverse variation, if it says varies inversely, you're going to be dividing. You're going to have y equals k divided by x, where k is going to be your constant of variation. Okay? Alright, so this first example, it says if y varies, anytime it says varies, that means the equal goes there. So it varies directly as x. And y equals 25 when x is 15. Find x when y equals 40. So in all of these examples that we're looking at, we're not going to know the constant of variation, which means we're not going to know k. So when you're reading your problem, you need to figure out which type of equation you need to set up. So if it says varies directly, it's a direct variation. So that formula would be y equals k times x. We're given right here when y is 25, x is 15. So we're going to plug into this equation. So in place of y, I'm going to put 25. And then in place of x, I'm going to put 15. So I'm going to be solving for k first. So I'm going to divide by 15 on both sides. And I want you to leave this as a fraction. Reduce 25 over 15 to 5 over 3. So there's our constant of variation, k. Once we have found k, we're going to plug it back into that direct variation formula, y equals k times x. Replace it with k, and notice now we're looking for x when y is 40. So we're replacing y with 40. We now know the constant, the k, it's 5 over 3, and we're looking for x. Okay, so notice we have a fraction. In order to get rid of a fraction that's attached to your variable, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So multiply by 5 or 3 over 5 on both sides of the equation. So that would give you 40 times 3 is 120 divided by 5. When you divide that, 120 by 5 is 24. So x would be 24. So first thing you need to do, you need to figure out what formula you're going to be using. Find your constant of variation first. Once you've found that, plug it back into your formula and figure out what your x would be. Okay? Alright, let's look at 2. If y varies inversely as x, and y equals 22 when x is 6, we're finding x when y is 15. Notice this one says inversely, which means we will use y equals k divided by x. So if it says inversely, you should be dividing. Okay, so we're going to plug in. We know y is 22 when x is 6. So 22 equals your constant of variation over 6. So we're solving for k. I would need to get rid of the 6 by multiplying on both sides. So you should end up with 132 equals k. Now use that same formula. We're looking for x when y is 15. So I'm plugging in 15 for y. I know the constant was 132 divided by x. So I would get rid of the denominator, multiply both sides by x. So you end up with 15x equals 132. So divide. At the very end, if you get a fraction, you can write it as a decimal. So x would equal 8.8. When you find your k to be a fraction or a decimal, leave it as a fraction because it makes it easier for you to plug back in and then solve for the variable that you're looking for. Okay, let's take a look at 3. It says if y varies directly as x and y equals 12 when x is 16, find y when x is 36. So it says directly, so we're going to be multiplying. So y equals k times x. We know y is 12 when x is 16. So 12 equals k times 16. We're solving for k, so divide by 16. Again, if your constant is a fraction, leave it as a fraction. Don't write it as a decimal because it makes it easier to plug back into. So that would be 3/4 when you reduce it. Okay, so y equals k times x. We're plugging it back into the same formula. This time we're looking for y when x is 36. So I have y equals the constant, which was 3/4. We're timesing it by x, which is 36. You could either do 36 times 3 and then divide by 4, or you could reduce this. That would be 9. So you should get 27 for your answer. All right, let's look at the back. When a quantity varies directly as the product of 2 or more quantities, the variation is called joint variation. So the product of 2 or more, which means you're multiplying the product. Okay, so we're going to get into using different variables. So on 4 it says if r varies. So we're setting up, let's start setting up our formula. So r varies jointly, which means we will be multiplying because that's what it just told us, as s and t. So we're going to have our constant and then s and t. You're always having a constant. Then it says inversely as u. If it's inversely, remember you're dividing. So we should be dividing by the u. So you have to come up with your formula on these. It gives us, it says r equals 18 when s is 2, t is 3, and u is 4. Find s when r is 6, t is 2, and u is 4. All right, so we're going to do the same thing that we did on the front. We're having to find k. So the first part of the information we're given, r is 18. We don't know k. S is 2. T is 3. And u is 4. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the 4. Multiply it on both sides. So that's going to give us 72. I'm going to go ahead and multiply those two together. So I would get 6k. And then divide by 6. You should get k equals 12. So there's our constant. We're going to use that same formula. We're looking for s when r is 6. We found k to be 12. The t is 2. And the u is 4. We need to get rid of the 4, so multiply it on both sides. So you get 24. I'm going to go ahead and multiply the 12 and the 2 to get 24s. And then I can divide. So your S would equal 1. You can easily check these by plugging it back in once you found your K and then your whatever variable you're looking for. You can always plug it back to your formula and make sure R equals the K times the S, the T divided by U. So you can always plug it back in and check it. Okay, so 5, it says if X varies jointly as Y and Z squared. So jointly we're going to be multiplying. So we should have X equals, you're always going to have a constant. That's the most mistake, or the what I see most is forgetting that constant, the K. Don't forget that. Jointly you're multiplying. So you're going to be multiplying the K times Y and Z squared. Notice it doesn't say inversely here, so we shouldn't have a fraction. It tells us X equals 100 when Y equals 2 and Z equals 5. Find X when Y is 4 and Z is 3. So we're going to plug in, find the constant starting out. So X is 100, Y is 2, Z is 5. Don't forget to square the Z. So when we're working this out, you can't multiply 2 and 5 and then square that answer. You have to square the 5, which would give us 25, and then multiply that by the 2 to get 50. So then we're dividing by 50. So your constant K should give you 2. Use that same formula to find the X. So we're looking for X. The K was 2. Look at the very last part. Find X when Y is 4 and Z is 3. Same thing here. Make sure that you square 3 before you multiply it. So that's going to give us a 9 there. So we're going to have 2 times 4, that's 8, and we're having to times that by the 9. You should get 72 for X. Again, if you wanted to check it, you could plug it back into your formula. That's if your formula is correct. So make sure that you're setting up the correct equation by reading the problem. Jointly is multiplying, directly is multiplying, inversely you're dividing.